Is your Palestinian relocation plan still on the table? Is there a plan? Has there been any progress in finding countries?
Maybe why don't I let you answer that question?
Mr. President.
Wait a minute, wait, he's got to answer the question.
I think President Trump had a brilliant vision. It's called free choice. You know, if people want to stay, they can stay. But if they want to leave, they should be able to leave. It shouldn't be a prison. It should be an open place and give people a free choice. We're working with the United States very closely about finding countries that will seek to realize what they always say, that they want to give the Palestinians a better future. And those who, and I think we're getting close to finding several countries, and I think this will give, again, the freedom to choose. Palestinians should have it. And I hope that we can secure it close by.
And we've had great cooperation from surrounding Israel, surrounding countries, great cooperation from every single one of them. So something good will happen.
Yeah, just when you couldn't think that the imperial powers that are supporting Israel couldn't go any lower, you are seeing what is happening right now. I'm Dan from the Internet. This is your detour, I guess, edition of Power Report. And I have been wanting to talk about this article for the past couple of days. I just got settled back in. Thanks for your patience, everyone. But Benjamin Netanyahu is just wrapping up a tour of Washington, D.C. This coming as the genocide in Gaza reaches its almost its 650th day. What you're seeing here, and what we've been seeing, is the coalescing, I'll just give it Trump's words, honestly. The final proposal. Does that sound familiar in history to anyone? The final proposal? Trump's full words via a post he made. My representatives had a long and productive meeting with the Israelis today on Gaza. Israel has agreed to the necessary conditions to finalize the 60-day ceasefire, during which time we will work with all parties to end the war. The Qataris and Egyptians, who have worked very hard to help bring peace, will deliver this final proposal. I hope for the good of the Middle East that Hamas takes this deal, because it will not get better. It will only get worse. It will only get worse in all caps. Thank you for your attention to this matter. End quote from Donald Trump. So this is the plan all along. Whenever there are all these like false ceasefire talks during the Biden administration, during the Trump administration, there are these, temporary stops here and there, haltings, but the savage just disaster keeps continuing to go on and definitely is not getting any better. And so with that, I wanted to go into this bombshell report from the Financial Times that explains what they've been going and trying to do over the past couple of months behind the scenes, what these proposals are to remake Gaza as a new imperialist sort of like Gulf state with a lot of American influence, with Israeli control under the Israeli sphere of influence. So in that greater Israel plot, is just an extension of their region. The UK getting their nut, Saudi Arabia getting their nut. It's kind of devastating. And if you didn't know any better, you would think that this is just precisely, you would think this is like new levels of bad. But the truth is, this is precisely how this regime and, many regimes in the West work. And frankly, a lot of regimes in the East, so to speak, want to continue and pass the baton on, which is why this is an anti-imperial show. But the Financial Times released this report called Tony Blair's Staff Took Part in the, quote, Gaza Riviera Project with BCG. That's the Boston Consulting Group. Before your eyes glaze over, this implicates a lot of people, including the Tony Blair Institute, which Tony Blair is the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was the one who followed George W. Bush into the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which were also based on false pretenses. You had Secretary of State at the time, Colin Powell, I want to believe, who has buildings and institutions and schools named after him, lied to the American public, lied to the American Congress, testifying that they had solid proof that there were weapons of mass destruction, and that's why we needed to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. The UK was like, yes, sir, mate, and went straight down and aided the United States in what became not just a 20-year boondoggle, but one whose ripple effects are going to be felt throughout the region, and frankly, in the United States, the United Kingdom, and every sort of nation involved in helping the United States for decades to come. So, reading from the Financial Times, this is great reporting from Stephen Foley and Jim Packard there. The Tony Blair Institute participated in a project to develop a post-war Gaza plan that envisaged kickstarting the enclave's economy with a quote-unquote Trump Riviera and an Elon Musk smart manufacturing zone. The plan outlined in a slide deck seen by the Financial Times was led by Israeli businessmen and used financial models developed inside Boston Consulting Group to reimagine Gaza as a thriving trading hub. Titled The Great Trust and shared with the Trump administration, it proposed paying half a million Palestinians to leave the area and attracting private investors to develop Gaza. Now, I want to get back to something Benjamin Netanyahu said near the end of his sort of like talk, press scrum with Donald Trump in the White House the other evening.
And I think this will give, again, the freedom to choose. Palestinians should have it. And I hope that we can secure it close by.
So Netanyahu is framing this as the freedom to choose, right? In the same country, the same White House, where he's speaking in, where the phrase life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are key values, supposed values, that America hasn't practiced since even before Donald Trump elected, but sure as hell isn't practicing right now. When you see families being ripped apart from each other, when you see elderly people on Medicaid and Medicare who are losing access to their coverage, seeing people who have disabilities who are on Social Security, who are getting it harder and harder to find the care and the support they need, and have paid into for all of their lives. To offer Palestinians freedom, as though, okay, you have the freedom to continue to run away from your homes, or we bomb you literally left, right, up, and down, or we'll give you a small amount of money to displace you and have you live somewhere else in a country that you may not have a lot of knowledge about, whether it's Egypt or whatever the partners they're talking about. And who knows how people are treated once they get there. We know how America treats its immigrants when they're coming, right? We've seen that ingrained into our culture. Now, I'm going off of what Bam, my co-host, does a lot on Power Report here. And so this is fairly disputed. Neither of us are Egyptians who have been to Egypt, but Bam has a lot more knowledge of, the Middle East and Central Asia more broadly than I do here. So when I am calling from him when he says this, but there are a lot of countries that look down on Palestinians, that treat Palestinians with disdain, with some sort of, a similar thing to a racial resentment that we get in the United States, unfortunately. That Palestinians get in the United States, that a lot of marginalized groups get in the United States. And so just assuming that, just send them to quote unquote other Muslim countries, even though you have Palestinian Christians, Palestinians, Jews, Palestinian people who aren't religious, just sending them to other countries and they will assimilate totally fine, is a very Western imperialist view of how people get along, or how you can group one group of people and be like, this is how all the Muslims are getting along. When we Americans know Christians often don't get along with other Christians. It used to be like, are you a Lutheran? Are you a Catholic? Are you a Episcopalian? But now it's like, okay, are you a Christian who supports Donald Trump, or are you a Christian who's against Donald Trump? Not sure if you saw this the other day, but I think this was part of the big, beautiful bill, but they got rid of that exemption that prevents churches from keeping their tax exempt status if they start to make political decisions. So now churches will be allowed to forcefully endorse candidates, and there will be no sort of accountability for that, which is crazy because they pay nothing in taxes. And usually when you aren't paying money in taxes, that means that as an organization, it's a lot harder for that organization to make an official stance when it comes to a presidential candidate. But yeah, that idea of freedom, the freedom to either be displaced and given a small sort of like severance pay, or be displaced because we bombed everyone older than you and everyone younger than you, is not freedom. To say we're going to forcibly remove you out is not freedom. It's this like weird, warped idea of how all of this works. But I want to continue here. There's some back and forth over whether the Tony Blair Institute authored or endorsed the final slide deck. There's kind of like this, you know, going back and forth with it seems to be here. But the Financial Times says one lengthy document on post-war Gaza written by a Tony Blair Institute staff member was shared within the group for consideration. This included the idea of a Gaza Riviera with artificial islands off the coast akin to those in Dubai, blockchain-based trade initiatives, a deep water port tie to Gaza, tie Gaza into the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, and low-tax special economic zones. So in Saudi Arabia, you have these special economic zones that are developed by, you know, the crown prince and like the sovereign wealth funds that these nations have. And I can get into those in another moment, but these are planned cities. They try to develop abundant water sources and, you know, water resorts in the middle of deserts. There was one plan the Saudi Arabians had to like create an artificial moon just to make one of their hotels nicer, like a large moon that you would see as if like the moon was rising and setting over the sea. And of course, people think of that NEOM, the line plan that was going to be like this line in front or like in the middle of, you know, somewhere in Saudi Arabia. That would be a vertical super city. That's what they see for Gaza. Notice how Palestinian self-determination is nowhere in those plans. There's Tony Blair Institute determination. There's Donald Trump's determination. There's Bibi Netanyahu's determination, but there's no Palestinian determination in this. They don't actually get a choice if you are presenting leave or die as their options. While there was some overlap, the Israeli businessman slide deck, which runs to more than 30 pages, differed significantly from the paper written by TBI staff. The Institute's document did not refer to the relocation of Palestinians, an idea championed by U.S. President Donald Trump earlier this year, but condemned internationally, at least back then. So at first, the TBI said your story is categorically wrong. Then the FT provided details of a 12-person message group used for the project, including 2 staff from TBI, 2 consultants from Boston Consultant Group, and the Israeli businessmen, and an unpublished TBI document shared within the group titled Gaza Economic Blueprint. To which TBI was like, oh, okay, so when we said that your story was categorically wrong, what we actually meant was we didn't actually know. We never said that TBI knew nothing about the group. We just said, you know, we weren't part of this. So, you know, they're equivocating, they're distancing here. Furthermore, I'm not going to read the full article here, although it's behind a paywall, so it has a lot of really good information. But you have some details about some of the people behind this project. But I really want to get to here. The businessmen's post-war blueprint imagined an expanded role for the aid operation, which would provide temporary housing to Palestinians who stayed in the territory, while cash payments and food and rent subsidies totaling $9,000 per head would encourage a quarter or more of the population to leave. The final slide deck, titled, quote, "The Great Trust from a demolished Iranian proxy to a prosperous Abrahamic ally," like, it's literally all right there. It's literally all right there. But the final slide deck has been shared with members of the current and former U.S. administrations, according to people familiar with the project and other governments and stakeholders in the Middle East. GREAT is supposed to be short for Gaza Reconstruction, Economic Acceleration, and Transformation. So I hate these acronyms. So let's break it down. They're going to displace Gazans. Some they claim they're going to give them money, but like $9,000 to leave the only home you've ever known to go to a foreign place where you may or may not be able to get a job, you may or may not be treated properly, that may or may not be able to cover any lingering healthcare expenses that happen either quickly or slowly when you are in the sort of situation as Gazans have been for the past even more than 2 years. That $9,000 isn't going to last, but it's okay because all of Gaza's public land would be put into a trust for development, and the Gazans would not be part of that trust. And the assets in that trust could be sold to investors. So people who already have money to invest in this sort of thing via digital tokens traded on a blockchain. So basically, you get to buy Gazan land for crypto. That's their plan, is selling off public lands to billionaire wealthy investors and boosting cryptocurrencies in the process. The trust would have administrative rights over the enclave of Gaza until it was, quote, demilitarized and de-radicalized, and authority could be passed to a, quote, independent Palestinian polity. So the slide deck has these different mega projects, which is where it really gets infuriating. One of which is meant to, kind of appease Donald Trump, where they're like giving Trump like a Riviera type project. And there's a little map here to kind of describe it. Among the 10 mega projects, the document includes the MBS Ring and MBZ Central Highways, named after the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, respectively. And an, quote, Elon Musk smart manufacturing zone on the Gaza-Israel border, where U.S. electric vehicle companies would build cars for export to Europe. It was prepared at a time when Musk was one of Trump's closest advisors before their subsequent souring of relations. So get this, to sweeten the deal, they're going to take what remains of Gaza, they're going to clear it out, they're going to build over the bodies of the martyrs who have been killed by the Palestinian regime over the past at least 2 years. And they're going to develop trade ports on the bottom. They're going to develop economic zones and plan cities, including properties that Trump is going to be able to license his name to, so that his family, even after he dies, is going to benefit from the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of people, rather, for, eternity, for the rest of their lives, for the rest of their kids' lives, for their grandkids' lives. You have roads that are being named after Saudis and the Emiratis, which makes a lot of sense when you look at what BAM, PowerPort co-host, and a lot of other people who watch the region and experts have said about what could have led to Hamas's actions on October 7th and the normalization of relations that Saudi Arabia was having with Israel and apparently a couple of others is seen to be, one of the leading reasons as to why Hamas wanted to assert themselves politically in this assault, was because they felt like they were losing any sort of other, I wouldn't necessarily call Saudi Arabia an ally, but they're losing any sort of other person who could or entity that could help them jump into it. But they're just literally taking Gaza apart and giving it away for scraps. Never mind some of the climate implications for this. This special American data safe haven, which is a dead giveaway to quote literal special US AI regulation. So the same thing that's apparently been done in the United States, where can't regulate AI, you're not allowed to regulate this technology that all the people who are creating it are either hyping it up or have already seen like what's behind the curtain, and they're telling us that this is going to catastrophically change the economy, eliminate millions of jobs, and they want no rules for it, and they want to use Gazan land to do it. You've got to understand how sickening this is to me, and should be to everyone. And there's going to be new highways. I mentioned the MBS and MBZ highways, accessing $1.3 trillion of rare earth minerals in the Gulf. And so I think I'll end here using a complex financial model produced by the BCG team. And by the way, Boston Consulting Group, there are a lot of these consulting groups. They're like Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated in a lot of cases, because they'll be tasked to run the numbers and do the math on some of the darkest, most evil things possible. It was exposed that while Pete Buttigieg was doing consulting, it basically amounted to fixing the bread prices in Canadian grocery stores. Literally figuring out how much you can hike the price of bread for poor people in Canada to see how much you can make those Canadian grocery stores more money. This is a lot of what consulting does. Like, it is an arm, it is a tool, kind of like law, kind of like a lot of financial sectors, to extract wealth and hoard it amongst themselves. And again, there are good people who work in these institutions. There are these institutions that some of them at least try to be altruistic in their work, but the vast majority of where the money is made goes to a lot of these darker things. So you've got to understand that about some of these institutions. But this is all the idea where they're talking about, oh, how much GDP can we increase? How many, opportunities can we build? Of course, they might have jobs in Gaza, but we already know you have a race to the bottom when it comes to labor, wages worldwide. How much do you think they're going to be paying people in Gaza? Do you think they're going to be paying them a living wage? Do you think there's going to be a system where they're rebuilding all of these, nice resorts and new dynamic modern planned cities, and those benefits are actually going to go to the people who end up staying in Gaza? It's too early for me to have a full-on crash out about this, but this is where American imperialism is taking us, where Western imperialism is taking us. And that doesn't mean, China having a take at how to plan out Gaza, or Russia having a take on how to plan out Gaza, the BRICS in general, right? Having a take on how to plan out Gaza. I don't want imperialism. I want self-determination for the people who live in whatever region they have. I want a set of laws and a strong legal system to be able to protect everyone in that society. It's something that I've especially realized living in the United States for the past couple of months. But ultimately, I hate to admit it, I think Kamala would have been a lot more pushable. I don't think you would have been seeing, Kamala Harris, don't worry, we're going to be naming the Kamala Harris Special Opportunity Zone for Gazan future Americans. That, I just mean to say that, the people who are saying that Trump won't be any worse on Palestine than Biden or Harris was, have been immediately discredited. Profoundly, profusely, either apologize right now or you're even more discredited, and you're obviously being seen as the obvious liars you are. I did want to end though on this note, and a shout out to Sai, Bad Lefty, Etch, who are in the chat on YouTube, folks who are watching on Twitch and elsewhere, folks who are watching in the future. Please make sure you like the video and comment below if this makes you angry, or if you learned something. But I also want to shout out that on the Second Thought YouTube channel, there's a video done pretty recently as well about, this plan from the Tony Blair Institute and Boston Consulting is one of many plans that have floated around. It's one of the newest plans, but just like Project 2025 and all these other things were floating around, don't be surprised when this stuff actually starts happening. Don't, weigh how effective it is to share the trauma of the Palestinians who are going through this, because there have been a lot of people who have just sort of continue to share the carnage and the human suffering of what's going on in Gaza beyond just a journalistic sort of reason to bring it awareness to the public. A lot of people have been doing it because these horrific things monetize for them and they sell people for them. And the sad piece of it is that we're now going to have to prepare for this future. We're going to have to think about, how do we resist this? How can we sort of fight this? How can we start to put some gears in the machine, put our bodies on the gears, and it's like Mario Savio would say, to stop some of these things from happening, because they don't have to be inevitabilities, but these appear to be very dark inevitabilities. But yeah, I wanted to play a little bit of this Second Thought video before I closed out here.
Israel's US-backed onslaught has destroyed or damaged 92% of all homes in Gaza and most major infrastructure. And what happens next is a question that seemingly a lot of people who aren't Palestinian have answers to. Last year, for example, Netanyahu unveiled Gaza 2035, a plan to turn Gaza over to Bahrain, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Morocco, and let them run the show until Gaza looks like a bad AI render. Or, just recently, the Arab League also proposed its own plan with its own projects for the area, complete with a new airport, 2 seaports, and an industrial zone. But above all others, one person in particular has had a lot to say.
I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza.
Build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2. Think of it as a real estate development for the future.
The Riviera of the Middle East.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply.
You have, there's that AI video where they've got Teslas driving through the Gaza Strip and Elon Musk eating like a bread dish that I unfortunately don't know, but also looks to be rendered like a chocolate chip cookie here, because it's bad AI. But
limited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
For the past few months, we've seen Trump broadcast his plan for Gaza, a plan to turn the area into what he's calling a Riviera. According to Trump, this project will usher in economic growth, safe housing, and even jobs for Palestinians in the Strip, transforming Gaza from its current state into an economic hub and tourist destination on the Mediterranean coast. It's all deeply disturbing for relatively obvious reasons, but one in particular.
These plans do all seem to presuppose some kind of ethnic cleansing.
That's the end of story on this. And one thing that is especially frightening is how much all these different plans, even that plan from the Arab League, you wouldn't believe it because it sounds very similar to the plan for. It sounds very, very similar to the plan for that Tony Blair Institute, that the Financial Times I just went over with, but they all overlap on certain things. Not only is it that they want to displace Palestinians, not only is it that they want to raise the entire Gaza Strip, not only is it that they want to turn it into a trading oasis and extract rare earth minerals and rename special economic zones after billionaires and oligarchs the world over. But it's all of this they're doing with no input from the Palestinians. Palestinians aren't asking for any of this. Palestinians barely asked for Hamas. The only reason you can say that is because in a similar situation to where Iranians don't necessarily like their government, they also don't like their country being indiscriminately bombed by Israel or the United States either. Okay. And you start to blur the lines between, okay, do I have to choose between an authoritarian government I really hate or external governments who are, you know, wanting to bomb us into submission? People will tend to want to protect their own, right? And so this is not going to go anywhere. Netanyahu doesn't want peace. Trump will do whatever Netanyahu wants based on money he's gotten from the Adelsons, money and support he's gotten from AIPAC. It's this illusion of choice, this illusion of freedom that is being given to the Palestinians is just that. And it's so hypocritical, not that hypocrisy even matters, but the same country like the United States that talks about choosing freedom down the barrel of a gun even dares to call people like Zoran Mamdani jihadists or people who are like crusaders, right? Just people who are Americans who are wearing suits and ties. That's enough of, you know, fighting for freedom down the barrel of a gun for them when they're not even the ones who are holding weapons. Imperialists will, to quote MF Doom, will make you drop your weapon, shoot you, and tell you to get to stepping. They will make you drop your weapon, shoot you, and tell you to get to stepping. That's what these bullies are like. And so just know for this what it is and watch out for it. Folks, thank you for watching. Thank you everyone else who's also joined in chat. Kat, Looney Tunes as well. To answer a question from earlier, HBX, I've been catching your content on this space. Are you going to do live content there? Yeah, thank you for checking out thisspace.tv, where we have a bunch of other leftist commentators who are all getting together in one place. I will try to do live content on there. Right now, my schedule and my life have been pretty hectic, and so getting these videos out and just keeping PowerPoint going every week and like a bare minimum basis is about my bandwidth right now. But I like all the folks on this space, a lot of them are guests on Power Report. I've been on their shows, and I'll definitely, as the ecosystem grows, you will see more of me on there as well. So yeah, I just wanted to give that note as well. But yes, thank you for asking the question. Thank you all for liking the video, sharing the video. Please help us out. I doubt even this video can get monetized because of the content I mentioned in it, but I'm passionate about it, and so we need to do it. Gonna have to make some goofy videos from here on out. All right, y'all. Peace, cheers, and have a good day.